Good afternoon, or maybe good late morning for y'all. Welcome to our webinar, Critique with Care, Best Practices for a High Quality Peer Review for our ASHE 2024 conference. My name is Jonathan Pryor, pronouns are he, him, his. I'm an associate professor at California State University, Fresno, located on the ancestral homelands of the Yokuts and Manos peoples. And I have the privilege of serving as the program committee co-chair for our 2024 ASHE conference. So our goal today is to learn from our ASHE colleagues who will provide their approaches for providing quality and constructive feedback as you consider your approach for engaging in the peer review process during the 2024 ASHE program reviews. And so we're excited to engage with you all. And our panelists in just a moment will introduce themselves, but we invite questions and anything that is lingering for you as you're considering completing your reviews for our ASHE 2024. And at the end of our time together, we'll turn over to our colleague Alicia from ASHE, who will walk us through some steps through the conference portal and answer any questions about kind of those logistics as we move forward. So I will happily turn over to Alicia now.
Thank you, Jonathan. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Association for the Study of Higher Education, better known as ASHE, I'm excited to welcome y'all today. As Jonathan mentioned, my name is Alicia Castillo-Shrestha. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director for Conference and Events for ASHE. And I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Satterwhite-David, who is here behind the scenes with me to help make sure that y'all get the most possible out of this experience and it's seamless for you. So if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A. You can also reach out to Erin and I and the panelists and host through the chat. If you need closed captions, those are available through Zoom AI, and you can enable them at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you're watching the recording, you can also enable the closed captions on the YouTube channel recording at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording the session. It will be available on the ASHE YouTube station and also posted on the reviewer website as a link so you can have easy access. So I will happily turn it over to the other co-chair for the program committee this year, Dr. Rosie Perez. Thank you so much for being here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Alicia. My name is Rosie Perez. I use she, her pronouns, and I have the privilege of serving as the program co-chair for ASHE 24. I am an associate professor at the University of Michigan, which resides on the ancestral and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires Confederacy, who are the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations. We are really excited to have such wonderful panelists with us today, and we would love for them to introduce themselves. And so I'll ask Dr. Pretty to start.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Kristen Pretty. I am an assistant research scientist with the National Survey of Student Engagement, also known as NSSE, at Indiana University Bloomington. And I say I've been part of ASHE since 2017, so about 7 years, and I reviewed probably about 4 years. So, okay.
Dr. Garcia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Garcia. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm an associate professor of educational administration at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I have been reviewing for ASHE for quite some time. I'm like counting it up, maybe in that 10-year-ish mark at this point in time. But I've also served as discussant and on journal editorial boards as well. And so being able to offer feedback and things like that is pretty crucial to all of those things, and have some insights to share around that for you all today.
Thank you. Dr. Quay.
Hi, everyone. Stephen Quay. I'm currently the Associate Dean for Excellence in Graduate and Postdoctoral Training in the graduate school at The Ohio State University, and I'm also a professor in the Higher Education and Student Affairs program. So I guess I'm the old timer on this call, as I've been reviewing for probably like close to 17 or so years. So again, delighted to join my colleagues here this afternoon.
Thanks so much, all, and we're excited to learn with you today. We, asked these folks to join us based on the care that they put into giving peer review across their time in ASHE and in other settings. So that could be journals, that might be in courses where students have engaged with them. These are deeply caring colleagues, and so we're grateful for your presence. So I'll start, we're gonna move into the panel discussion. So Stephen, when you think about the best conference proposal feedback you've received, what did that look like?
Yeah, so when I think of the best conference proposal I received, it had these three qualities. It was kind, generative, and helpful, and I'll talk through each of those three qualities right now. So by kind, I mean that the reviewer offered critique without being nasty or personal. I think it's really important to clarify that I don't think kind is synonymous with like nice, or it means you're not offering feedback or critique. Rather, it means that you're taking the person into consideration. Like, you're not making it about the person's qualities, but rather you're sticking to the proposal. And so the best feedback I've gotten has really taken me into consideration, has been thoughtful, and sort of the care that Rosie mentioned at the start. So I think was one important feature. Again, it was not nasty, but it offered critique. It was insightful, but it also took me as a human being, as a person, into consideration. The second quality then was that it was generative. And so what I mean by that, like, I really love the word generative. What I mean by that is that I felt like the reviewer were having a conversation with me. Like, it wasn't, face to face, but I felt like they were treating my work as if they were in conversation with me, like asking questions of the work, checking in to make sure they understood what I was trying to portray accurately. So it literally felt like we were side by side, just talking about my work, based on, again, the questions they were asking, them pointing out how they were hearing the work that I was submitting. So I thought that was also like really important. And then I think the third quality, which to me is also equally important, is that it was helpful. So one of the things that I often tell students who are writing is, I need you to use examples when you're writing, like examples, examples, examples. And so similarly, I think this feedback that I have gotten, the reason that it made it strong was they were helpful in the sense that they provided examples to support their point. So rather than saying this part is unclear, which is, pretty vague and doesn't really tell you why it's unclear to them, because clearly I thought it was clear, right? Because I wrote it. So rather than just sort of saying that and leaving it at that, they provided an example of, here's why it's unclear, and here's a way that you can make it stronger. So that to me was like really important. So again, I think when I think of the best feedback I've received, they all had those three qualities, right? And this has happened in multiple years. Sometimes it doesn't always go that well, but generally, it had kindness, it was generative, and it was helpful.
Thank you. Kristen or Crystal, any other features to really helpful feedback over the course of your time in ASHE?
I'll add, one of the most important, I think, feedback actually came from an ASHE proposal. And obviously they didn't know it was like my dissertation beginning stages, but they just had one statement, and it said, be bold in your scholarship. And so I think also being really encouraging, like they didn't know I needed those words at that time, but they probably could tell I was wrestling with a lot of ideas and trying to figure out how to do that. And so I put that statement in like my proposal, my defense, like, because it was very encouraging just to know that someone else out there saw the work I was trying to do. And so I think too, like, if you, see or want to invite those statements of encouragement for someone you see is wrestling with some ideas or wanting to push, but maybe not knowing how, I think those are also really great ways to, and things to incorporate in feedback as well. So.
And I would also just add that whatever you initially type up or write, reread it once and maybe reread it again and really think, like, what are the words that I'm using here? How have I centered that kind, constructive tone and feedback? Because I completely agree that that's essential. And sometimes we don't even realize how we're framing things or writing things until we really reread it and consider it more critically.
Yeah, the one piece I might add for folks also to consider is that these are proposals. It's not a full paper, right? So sometimes when we develop feedback, It's been helpful when I see things say like in the full paper, it would be great if you X, because you might not be able to get into the details of something. But to that point of being generative, how do you cue people into things that you hope to see in a more, when they have more space? Sometimes people treat proposals like it's a full paper, but it's 2,000 words, not 7 to 10,000. And so people make choices. And so how we might engage with what's present and what's absent, kind of acknowledging that people are making choices in that space as well. Thanks all.
Yeah, thank you all. So I'm gonna take over to Crystal. Kind of the converse point of that question, the previous question is, what were the features of a poor or less helpful peer review that you've received?
It's probably not surprising that a lot of what I'm about to share directly connects with what Dr. Quay had already shared. I kind of categorize them into two buckets. One, the low score review with non-specific, unhelpful feedback. It's just like very generic. It could have been copied and pasted over many different proposals type of feedback. Not helpful to folks. And you have to think about how much time and effort that these individuals are putting into this work, and how much time that they have invested in even planning the project or envisioning what type of contribution that they want to make to higher ed research. So again, kind of thinking and recentering that humanizing approach, it would be helpful to be more specific, rather than say things like, your introduction should be stronger, or your literature review needs to be more developed. Give actionable feedback paired alongside those types of things. So if you want folks to include more or different references to the literature, give them some examples or refer them to authors that maybe they could look into and extend the work that they've already started on. And then the second kind of bucket is the reviews that only tear down, but don't offer ways to build back up. And so that really kind of aligns with thinking about that approach and how we construct our language, how we think about tone. And spoiler alert, it's okay to comment on good things about a proposal. I know I feel myself being very kind of inclined to do this sometimes, especially when grading papers. I'm only looking for things to critique, and I'm not always thinking about, well, what are the strengths of this as well? And am I really bringing that to light? Because that could help someone to keep moving forward with a proposal, even if it gets denied from the conference. Some folks may give up on research projects because they receive such poor feedback. And I don't think that that's the takeaway that we want people to leave with. So just consider, like, how can I lift up this person, this work, these researchers? How can I encourage them to keep it moving, even if I can kind of see that it's not ready to be presented at this year's conference, right? So continue to be specific and give examples and think about that uplifting spirit, I think. And I think that would combat some of these not so great aspects of review.
Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that kind of assets-based approach and thinking about how we navigate our peer review process. Kristen or Stephen, any additional thoughts? That's great. All right, well, for our next question, sorry, now I'm going off the script, but I'm going to take it, Rosie, because I've already started. This is for Kristen. What measures do you take to ensure you're approaching your reviews through lenses of equity and inclusion?
Yeah, so I think what I try to think about overall is just kind of like an ethic of care. I think we joke about reviewer two, maybe we joke about academia, but I think far too many of us have harmful stories from reviews. And so I think of my role in that and not wanting to be a contributor to kind of that harmfulness and kind of like less helpful feedback that Crystal was talking about. But I think what Rosie was talking about earlier is kind of my point of, these are ideas. that people are percolating on, wanting to get feedback on. I know a lot of people submit and it's like, hey, let's just see what happens. I know that's, helpful in the conference proposal phase, but also in the publication phase, right? Like I want to submit something just to get some feedback, some understanding and some other eyes on it to see. And so I think really thinking about the fact that most of these people who are submitting proposals are really just trying to get some eyes on their work and figure out what kind of they can tailor. And so I think with the other bits of feedback, that's really, really helpful as just kind of like a tool to really in the feedback review kind of iteration process. But I also think of the positionality of people. I know there's a lot of grad students who are participating in submitting conference proposals. And so again, I don't want to be that reviewer 2 or 1 or 3 or whatever that is part of the harmful narrative of feedback they've gotten. And so, and again, too, a lot of these people can be proposing something for a master's thesis or a dissertation project or class project and something. And so just really trying to consider who is on the other side and not necessarily, guesstimate or anything like that, but just assume that they really are just wanting something helpful to help them move forward, whether or not it's with this proposal or another space that can be helpful. But I also think too, I think of kind of how we consider ideas and where we're at in terms of our learning. And so, I may be at a farther place in my learning about a certain concept that somebody else is, but that doesn't necessarily mean I shame or tear down someone for not being at the same place. And so I think too, considering that everyone's at a different stage of learning, of growing, of unlearning, of unknowing certain concepts. And so again, I think what my colleagues have shared about really being helpful in the feedback and encouraging and maybe guiding towards certain different resources or saying, hey, maybe check out this book or chapter or article that maybe help inform your knowledge of that. And so I think that's really where I try to come from through like an overall ethos of care, but also considering my positionality and just considering that these are really just ideas that people really want feedback on. And so if I can be helpful in that process, that's what I aim to do.
Oh, go ahead, Stephen. Sorry. Thank you, Kristen.
So what I would add to just some of the things that Dr. Pretty talked about, and I may be, Dr. Pretty may be sharing some of these pieces in the response to the next question, so I apologize if you are. But one of the things that I think about in relationship to equity and inclusion, so it's not necessarily about like the definitions, I think, of those terms, but I try to really review proposals when I'm at my best, because I think that provides like an equitable process for those who are sharing their work with me. And so like an example, so I'm a morning person, like a very early morning person. So my best hours to work are between like 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. So I make sure that that's when I'm reviewing proposals. I make sure that's when I'm giving feedback, because again, when I'm more tired, like later in the day, I'm less patient, so I get more easily frustrated, and so I find that I'm not providing kind feedback at that time of day generally. So so I think in order to ensure like equity and inclusion, like I make sure that I'm treating each proposal with the same care. And so that means to me like knowing that I'm doing it when I'm at my best so that I can really provide my best feedback. So I think that's also like really important for me.
I'll also just add, Dr. Pretty made such an important point of meeting people where they're at. And I think that that is a really good reminder of remembering that even if someone frames something in what we might deem as like a problematic way, of considering maybe it's possible that they didn't intentionally do so, how would I approach this individual if it was a student in my class, or if it was a colleague that I'm having a conversation with? What kind of care and language and what kind of learning moment could this potentially be for that author as well? So I appreciate you, Dr. Pretty, for bringing that up.
As co-chair of the program committee, Jonathan and I will also encourage you. One thing to attend to in equity inclusion is, do you have a conflict of interest, or do you have the expertise to review this? Right. So sometimes, they're supposed to be masked reviews. Like, we're not always supposed to know, but lots of us are connected to folks. You've read people's work, you've met with them, maybe they're your classmate. And so if you have a strong thought that I know who wrote this and I don't mean like I know this because I've read their work and we're about 10 people away, but I mean, this is somebody who I know fairly well. And I'm not confident that I can provide, and I don't, we always have bias, but a review based solely on the content of this proposal, right? There are opportunities for us to say, I can't do that. Or if you read, at least take a quick pass and you say, oh, these use methods that are far beyond my training, or I know nothing about this content. It's next door, but I don't know enough. Please, please, please be in contact with Alicia, Jonathan, and I about that process. And we do have a number of folks who have to say, you know what, I actually don't know enough to be equitable in my ability to, you know, read this proposal, right? I might rate it lower because I don't know this content area or these methods fairly well, which I think as a reviewer is kind of a humbling thing to say, like, I don't know enough to do this colleague justice. But it's a really important part of the process that I think sometimes when we're doing this process and lots of things are moving, it can be easy to miss that part, the quick look over to make sure that we know enough and are distanced enough from the who we think might have written this or don't know, to be able to provide caring, constructive feedback. Jonathan, anything to add?
No, I think that these are all great considerations for us, and I really appreciate the point of, as a reviewer, let us know if you feel like you're not able to provide that, right? And that does take some, I think, humility for us as academics, but I really thank the panelists for the thoughtful considerations with this question.
Yeah. So we started moving this direction, right? We're often assigned lots of tasks. There's lots of things to do. It is a very challenging time of year for many folks. So Dr. Pretty, how do you ensure, you know, if you've got 10 proposals, how do you assure that author number 10 gets the same care in your review as author 1, the very first proposal you read?
Yeah, so Dr. Pei talked about this in terms of timing and kind of reviewing. I think I take a couple of approaches. And I think it's another question too. Like, I take a really long time to review because I want to make sure I'm very thorough in reading all of the parts. And so I know if I have 10 reviews to do, they all cannot be done in one day. And so trying not to procrastinate, I think, is a big one that is hard because of scheduling and timing and stuff like that. But trying to space it out so where I'm only doing max 2 to 3 a day, because these are shorter proposals, but trying to space that out. But also too, sometimes what I try to do is if I'm reading too much of the same topic, I'll try to make it so I read different topics in the same day, because I think if you're kind of getting oversaturated and thinking about one proposal with a similar topic than another proposal, the opportunity to compare, to contrast, to, they did this one better than this one, can kind of seep in, and we want to, judge each proposal on its own merit. And so I think too, making sure that the topics I review in the same day are a little bit different. But I think also Dr. Clay talked about it, just really thinking of when is your best time to review? I'm not a morning person or a night person. I'm a middle of the day person, right? So I think, kind of figuring out that space, but also recognizing too, like, if I can't give this more than an hour of my time, then I probably shouldn't start it or I finish it at that moment. So what I also do too is I will just take notes and start the review at some time, and then close it out and then kind of revisit it the next day when I'm feeling a bit more refreshed. I have kind of a bit more clarity on the topics and ideas I'm thinking about. And then that's when I usually kind of sum it up and write an overall statement. I think Dr. Garcia talked about like the positive, right? So I'll kind of be like, overall, this is a really great topic and really love this. And here's where we can kind of consider what can be next. And so I try some of those different approaches. I think it's also kind of a bit like grading where, student 1, you're going down Canvas, and student 20, you start to see different things. And so I really think making sure you give yourself enough time, knowing that it's going to take time to carve out, be able to do the reviews. And if you have more than 4 or 5, how do you split up in days in ways that make sense to you to feel refreshed and have some clarity on the topics?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pretty. That resonates with me in some of my experiences where I don't rush it. And so allocating that hour of time, and similar to Dr. Quay's point as well, when is your best time? Those have been strategies that have been helpful for me as I've continued to develop my review process. And so I really appreciate those insights. Other panelists, any other thoughts of how you ensure review or your 10th proposal gets the same as proposal 1? I think we covered that well. Well, so for my next questions for Dr. Quay is, how do you think your approach to peer review has changed over time? And as you shared earlier, you've been a member providing these reviews for a while. So how has that looked for you as some of our colleagues who might be new and this is their first time compared to those who might be stuck in their ways and not considering critiquing with care?
Yeah, so great question. I think like anything in life, I think the more that you practice doing reviews, the stronger you become at it. So that's like one big piece of feedback that I give to any new reviewer is to just try it out, practice, keep doing it. Like read your peers' work, your colleagues' work, other people's work, because I think just anytime you're reading somebody else's work and giving feedback, it helps in this process as well. So I just lead with that. The other thing that I think is important, so one of my other roles is I'm the editor of the Journal of Higher Education. And so I'm reading full manuscripts, probably several manuscripts every week. And so although these are proposals, which is different from a completed manuscript, I think it's the same process. The more that I read other people's work, the better I become as a writer myself, actually, and the better that I become at trying to provide feedback. So that's like another strategy that I use is like when you read manuscripts, I think it helps you understand, oh, I really like how this author did this, so I can maybe provide that feedback on this proposal, right? So I think that's another piece. So my direct answer to the question, so I think earlier in my time reviewing proposals, it took me really long, partly because it's one of those like hidden curriculum things. Like by hidden curriculum, I mean it's something that we all just sort of take for granted as people who have done reviews, but nobody ever really teaches us how to do it. And so it's like you just sort of figure it out, and you also don't ever get feedback on it. So it's like you submit it and you're like, well, I hope that was okay, right? And usually it's not until like somebody provides feedback that actually that was not so good, right? But we rarely get feedback on this process that so many of us do so often. So it's hard to know whether or not we're actually helpful in doing it. And so all of that is to say earlier it just took longer because I wasn't sure whether this was helpful or whether I was doing it quote unquote correctly. And so I often focused on things like writing technique and style, partly because I felt less confident in like my knowledge around like the ideas. And so it was easier for me to focus on like the style of the author's writing, which likely wasn't very helpful to authors. So much like sort of my early teaching days, I often shudder when I think of like the feedback that earlier authors got, like when I was newer in this process, because it probably wasn't very helpful. So over time, I've learned that what I focus on now is less on writing style. Like I'll still point out things if it's unclear and provide examples about why, but I try to focus more on like the ideas that the author is offering. So are the ideas clear to me? Do I feel like they're making a contribution? Do I feel like it's extending the literature in some way? So those are like questions that I'm asking myself. Much like I said earlier, I'm also trying to be in conversation with the author now as well than I was before, meaning that I'm trying to help them see how I'm understanding their work. So I might write something like at the start, here's what I took from this proposal, because it helps me sort of like tell them, here's how I'm making sense of it, and maybe different from how you intended me to make sense of it, but here's how I'm making sense of it. And if that doesn't align, then I think it tells me as an author or the author that, well, wow, that's not at all what I was trying to convey. So maybe I need to revise it in this way. So I think I've shifted to that approach over time as well. And then I often offer ways to like make the argument stronger. So I might say something like, this is what I took from the first two sentences. I think this is what you're trying to convey, but here's why I don't feel like it really conveyed exactly what you're hoping for. So again, I've shifted from like more of like the writing style to more of like the ideas. And because of that, so to Dr. Pretty's point from earlier, I think I'm much more efficient in my reviews, partly because I'm spending less time on the writing, because again, these are, many people have said this, I think Dr. Garcia said it first, these are like ideas that are unfinished, right? And so it's a proposal, they're proposing to do something, right? They haven't actually finished it yet. So I shouldn't spend my time so much on like the writing, because, you know, like it's, again, I want to help them hone their ideas to make it stronger. So because of that, I think I'm more efficient now, because I'm focused more on like the bigger ideas that they're trying to offer and less focused on like the technical aspects of their writing. And again, this is not to say the writing still matters. I do want to emphasize that. Like if something is not clear, like it weakens the proposal. But what I'm saying is that I try to shift the attention to the content and the ideas and less on the technical writing, but I still point out places that it's unclear, because again, that helps with the ideas part. So so I think that's ways in which my approach has like shifted over time.
I also want to add, I think too, being a doctoral student 3 years ago now, and now being, you know, outside of graduate school, I think that's also shifted in terms of confidence, because I think as a graduate student, you're not sure if you're equipped or prepared, or kind of you have the knowledge in order to give certain reviews. And so I think also recognizing that like your perspective is important. And I think that's something I had to learn over time. And so now that I have more confidence and feeling like, okay, like my perspective will be valuable here, because I think that knowledge will be important. And obviously following kind of the guidelines of being kind and caring and generative in your feedback. But I think too, there is kind of this feeling as a doctoral student, or as you're approaching kind of the nearing the end of your doctoral studies, you're not really sure where your perspective fits. And so I think ASHE, allowing doctoral students, doctoral candidates be a part of the review process, demonstrates that your perspective is important. And so I think I wanted to uplift that in terms of just how it can also be a confidence building process.
Wonderful. And so then finally, like of our prepared questions, Dr. Garcia, what do you wish you knew about serving as a reviewer for ASHE, the conference, before you began providing feedback to your colleagues?
Yeah, I was kind of over here kind of silently nodding, because one of the points was very much connected to what Dr. Pretty was just sharing, and that is really taking a step back, and instead of thinking about this as like a service obligation or just something that I do every year or sign up for, but really considering you are playing an integral part of shaping the scholarship and research that is shared in this very significant space in our field. And that's impactful. Like just thinking about the power that we have as reviewers in deciding, you know, what work is featured within the conference and what work isn't. And so there's a lot of responsibility, I think, that should be considered when we think about that kind of power. And so first, it's exciting to think I could contribute in this very meaningful way. And there are ways that I can shape our field and what we know and how that information is disseminated. And I think that kind of leading with that mentality, as opposed to, oh, another thing I have to add to my agenda, is probably going to refresh you and energize you in a way that will kind of help the other questions, right, of treating the number 10 review the same way as number 1, and really kind of circling back to all of the concepts that we've been talking about. So just thinking about that aspect, shaping the future of research. And then the second one is just that your review can actually be filled with joy. And I think that I never really thought about joy as being a part of a review process, or considered that that could be a possibility in how I convey ideas and feedback. But I mean, it doesn't always call for it, right? But we can certainly celebrate people that are doing amazing work, groundbreaking work, meaningful work that's pushing our field forward in ways that are needed. Again, that goes back to the ways that we frame our feedback, but also I started over time, and this is one way that my reviews have changed over the years, adding exclamation points from time to time. I'm an exclamation point person, and I felt like I was holding the exclamation points back, like this isn't professional enough, like that would be looked down upon if I, talked in this way, or even talking in a very relational, conversational tone, showing up in the ways that you just show up in the world and not having to put on some kind of professional facade, to me is also one way that I center joy and community building and relationships in this very anonymous process, realizing that there's still humans on the other end of, they're receiving this information from me. And so, authors only have the text feedback to really get a sense of what you're trying to say about their work, and to feel the vibe of what you're sending out. So, if the occasion calls for it, I say celebrate, bring the joy. It will probably make you feel more energized too as you're working through these things too. But yeah, those are a couple things that I wish that I had really thought of since the start, but I'm really trying to do better in centering that.
Just two things I'll encourage folks to do that I think I've tended to do, but didn't always think about it. Like now I do it with intention, right? One is to make sure that my feedback is aligned, right? Like making sure that there's like numerical scores, but that your comment and your ultimate recommendation kind of makes sense, right? If you give it all 5 stars and then you say reject, folks on the program committee go, I don't know what to do with this. And then an author receives it and says, I don't know what to do with this. You gave me all 5 stars and everything says it's terrible, or you told me how wonderful it is and then your recommendation was to reject. So really thinking about alignment is important. And then I didn't always think about how to use that box that says things I want to tell the program committee. And I often use that if I'm like, either I love this is so good, you must put that in here. I will usually leave a comment that says, this is really compelling, it is beautifully written, people aren't doing this, it will really advance the field, kind of making a separate case for why I think this should get into the conference. And honestly, I'm also vocal about the times where I've been kind of struggling, like I like this, and I don't know if I don't necessarily think this is a reject, but I'm not quite sure it's gonna move into the accept pile, right? So how do we help our colleagues on the program committee who then receive lots and lots of feedback about many proposals and are trying to make sense of vast amounts of information about many good ideas, right? So there's kind of different kinds of recommendations we can make in generative ways to help each other out. And I didn't always think about the feedback that might help the next reader that wasn't the author make sense of what I wanted to convey. So I was really focused on like talking to this author or this author group and not necessarily thinking about the people who will read this after me and then are then doing another layer of synthesizing and thinking across many proposals. Well, we have a little time. We have a few questions in the Q&A that we've tried to lift up. Some of them I think we've answered a few of them by text. Maybe I'll start at the top. When we think about when we see gaps, and I won't just say literature reviews, but if we think there are gaps or omissions across the proposal, there's a couple questions about incompleteness. How much time do you spend trying to help an author out? How do you figure out what suggestions you want to make? Because maybe there's many you can make, but we only have so much in text boxes. So how do you weigh what kind of feedback when you're looking for specificity you offer and the time it takes to offer specific feedback?
I'll hop in. So for me, I feel like this often comes back to that question of alignment with research interests. And so, if you find that you have a review that you have no topical expertise on, you may want to consider, is this one that I really feel comfortable reviewing to start? But if it is one that you're more familiar with, you've read some work that you think could connect to this, what I usually do is I think of authors immediately that I know are doing work around this, that I could just refer them to and say, some of these folks are doing really great work in this area. You may connect with their work and then kind of, find other pieces that might connect to your work from that point forward. In other cases, I have thought specifically, oh, I just read this article, and this goes back to Dr. Quay's point about reading and being really connected with research. I just read this article. It is directly aligned with this work. And in those cases, I will do the work of like going through, doing a quick Google search, making sure that I have the correct information to connect in. But at no point am I really like doing their lit review for them, of like doing a deep dive and searching for like many articles. It's for me usually just more of things or authors or articles or pieces that I immediately consider and connect with. But others may have different feedback or insight.
Yeah, I think there's two approaches I would take. One, I would try to give feedback on what is there, because I think it could be easy to quickly dismiss it and say, it's incomplete, so therefore I probably shouldn't give much or anything like that. And so kind of offer some thoughts on what is there. But I think also offering thoughts in terms of how it can be improved or how it can be completed. And so, I think of like, I think this would be a really great section to include this part as you're developing, edits to the proposal or a meeting script or something like that too. So also providing some suggestions for how they can move forward, because incompleteness is not a sign of that they didn't want to do it. And there may be a lot of reasons why it's incomplete, right? And so again, just offering feedback on what is there and how they can advance the work. If they have more time or had more energy or space, what could be helpful as they move it forward. So that's kind of how I would approach it.
It looks like for our Q&A, we've got most of them covered, whether it's responded directly in the chat. So I saw Dr. Quay, you responded to the advice for first time reviewing, feeling that imposter syndrome. So if you're in the Q&A, you can see that, but want to open up that space for others. We have thoughts of how you kind of worked through feeling like an imposter your first time as a reviewer.
Any other tips or tricks that we want to offer folks before we pass it over to Alicia? Maybe things we haven't covered or that are sparking now that you're seeing the kinds of questions that folks have.
So one of the things I mentioned briefly earlier that I just want to reiterate and highlight is, I think this is what's hard about, I think, reviewing. Again, it's one of those processes that you rarely get feedback on it. So I think for those who are wondering about whether or not your review is helpful or not, I think it's totally appropriate to, once you're done with the review, like ask a friend or colleague just to read it over and see, like, do they feel like this is, if they got this, would this be helpful, right? And they don't have the benefit of having read the proposal. But I think you can get that kind of feedback to just say, like, just take a look at this. Like, is it helpful? Is it clear? Are there things that I'm missing? Is it kind, right? Is it nasty, right? I mean, you can ask feedback on those sorts of things so that you at least know that from somebody else's perspective, that this is, if they got this, like this would be received well. And if not, here's how you can expand it or change it to make it better. But I do think a lot about this process because it's something that all of us do so frequently, but yet we rarely know whether or not it's helpful. And there are times when it is helpful, and doesn't mean my second one's going to be helpful, right? Because sometimes it's hard for me. Sometimes I honestly don't know what feedback to provide, either because I feel like the topic is out of my wheelhouse or I'm just not clear, right? So I know there are times when I give feedback that I know that that probably wasn't very helpful for the author, but it's because I feel stuck as a reviewer. So I think all of that is to say, like, I think just do the best that you can, and know that there are times when we don't show up as best as we can, but we still have to try. But I think the more that we can sort of do this in practice and ask for feedback from other people, I think the better that we become at it.
I think we are at about a great stopping point to have Alicia rejoin us, and take us through everyone's favorite portal for program reviewing, all academic. We spend a lot of time in portals reviewing things.
Yes, indeed. So thank you, Rosie, and Jonathan, and to our wonderful panelists. We purposefully have this order, right? We want you to be in the right headspace and heart space to review, and then we walk you through the logistics of how you're going to put all this amazing feedback into action. So if you've already started reviews, that's wonderful. If you haven't yet, hopefully this next session will be helpful to you. Again, the recording will be available and you'll have access to a lot of this information after the fact. So let me make sure I could share my screen here. All right, can y'all see my screen? Okay, perfect. So the first thing I want to do is kind of walk you through, sorry, there's some things here. So as a reviewer, first of all, thank you, right? This is a huge piece of what makes the ASHE conference possible, is having this peer review process. And it's such an important piece of the association and moving our association and the work forward. So if you volunteered to review, or if you submitted and have been assigned reviewers, you should have received an email from me. The first batch went out on May 10th on Friday. So it looks like this. And there is a lot of information here, but we want you to make sure you flag it. You can come back to it because everything we put in here, we're hoping will help you as a reviewer make this process as easy as possible. So there's a link here, which we'll go into in a second, but that's the link to the conference portal where you can access your reviews. The reminder that the due date for your reviews is May 28th. It's a Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central. That is something that we ask you to try to adhere to, because our programming committee will meet shortly after to review all the feedback from the reviewers. So we do hope that you can make that due date. And if you have any issues, you can reach out to us at conference@ashe.ws. We know life happens, and if there's something that unexpectedly has come up and you're unable to make that date, please reach out and let us know as soon as you can. Conversely, if you finish early and you are looking to get more expertise and experience, and you want to read some more amazing work, and you're available to take on more reviews, let us know that as well. We'd be happily look for more. We're always looking for more volunteers at this time of the year. So this webinar will be recorded, as I mentioned. It's going to be up and available to you on this reviewers resource webpage. So this part of the email really wanted to point out to y'all. So as mentioned, in the next few days, if you haven't already started, we want you to skim all the proposals that you have been assigned to make sure that you do not have a conflict of interest, as has been discussed, and also that you have either the topical, methodological, or general expertise. I did want to point out that there are 3 reviewers assigned to each proposal. So you may not have expertise around the topic. You may not have methodological expertise around the method, but you may have been assigned as a generalist. And so you may feel like, okay, I don't necessarily feel all that confident in the topic. It's kind of new to me. Haven't really had a lot of experience with the method, but I do have something to to contribute to this. And as a generalist, you may be able to point out a different things that the other reviewers may not point out. And so we really want you to think about what you have to offer, because even if you don't feel confident in the topical or the methodological pieces of the proposal, you may have a lot to offer as a generalist. So really want you to think about that and realize there are 3 reviewers, so you won't be alone in your feedback. But if you do have, if you feel like it's a mismatch or there's a conflict of interest, this is the form that's linked. And so you'll just give us the information in terms of the proposal, the section it's in, and then the reason that you believe there's a mismatch or a conflict of interest. And then if you're able to take on a review in place of that. I know there have been some questions about the conflict of interest in the chat. If you have any questions, you can also email conference@ashe.ws, and we'll be happy to talk through specific things that may have come up or that you're wondering about. So additionally, we have a guide that we put together for y'all when you're doing your proposals, reviews. And so this guide has a lot of great information in it, and I wanted to highlight the review criteria. So as mentioned, you only want to critique pieces that you're supposed to be critiquing, right? So there's a lot of different types of proposals. And so, for example, you will only have space to critique areas that are relevant to the proposal. So we have a proposal type called works in progress as an example. So those are, for those of you who are familiar with ASHE, they're formerly roundtables, now works in progress. And they're really meant to be able to have more of a dialogue around topics that don't have any findings yet. So if you're reviewing a proposal and you're like, there's no findings here, that's really, I don't know what to do about that, but it may be a works in progress, and you'll note that you won't have that area in your portal to actually critique. So you want to make sure you understand the type of proposal you're looking at, and you can come to this guide to kind of see what information you're supposed to be reviewing. We talked about masked proposals as well. So some qualifications will be there to look at the perspectives of the presenters as something to consider when you're looking at your recommendation. So you may have an interactive symposium to review, and that actually is unmasked, because those interactive symposia, who's putting that session together really affects kind of the success of that topic. And so that's something that we actually do want you to weigh in on. And so those are unmasked. So if you're looking at your proposals, you're like, oh, this one is unmasked, is that supposed to be the case? And you can see if it's an interactive symposia, that's fine. If you see something that's unmasked that shouldn't be, again, email us at conference@ASHE, and we will help make sure that we get that reassigned, because we do want to maintain the masked process for every other proposal besides the interactive symposia. So this guide has the breakdown as well from the differences in, like I mentioned, the works in progress, the scholarly papers versus the research papers, the posters, PVDS sessions. So you're able to reference this again to kind of really remind yourself of what you're reviewing and what's in front of you. So we encourage you to take a look at that. And once you are ready, we have some additional information about things that in our process that are in place to help you be successful as a reviewer. But we do want to look across the consistency, as was mentioned by Dr. Perez, in terms of the consistency of your evaluation. And so let's actually go into the system and kind of look at how we begin to do this review. So you're going to log into the system, and you can do that via the link here. It's the same portal if you submitted a proposal that you would have submitted through. So this is a landing page for one of our working accounts that we use for training purposes. And so you can see on my landing page, I have this box here that shows pending proposals. So it's not as so intuitive, because in this column here, I have one, and in this column here, I have another one. So it looks like it says total 1 and 1. So I have 2 proposals. This first column is individual submissions. So those are the scholarly papers, the PVDS individual sessions, the works in progress. This column is the sessions. So things that are full sessions at the conference, like an interactive symposia, a PVDS full session, a self-designed paper session, etc. So that's why that's kind of laid out the way it is. But we'll get into more detail when we click on the review here. So this is where I can then see I have 2 reviews to do in 2 different subsections. So my first is in community university praxis. I have 1 pending here, and I have 1 pending here in policy, finance, and economics. So from here, I can go into each subsection, and then again, reminds me I have 1 pending in this subsection and 2 across all my subsections. So, but if I'm looking at this, I default to this tab here. You see individual presentations, but there's nothing here to review. So where is my proposal I'm supposed to be looking at? It's actually tucked away here in the sessions tab in my case. So I'm going to click on this tab and toggle over. And I can see, okay, yes, this is a PVDS session that I'm reviewing. So this is a full session. So if I need to remind myself of what that means, I can go back to the review guide. But let's say I've done my pre-work and I'm ready to review. I can click on this and it gives me some great information. Some of these bold pieces you want to pay attention to. As you're doing your work, the system will log you out after 60 minutes of inactivity. So if you look at the top here, I've got a countdown going 59 minutes before it's going to automatically log me out. I can click on that to reset it. It'll also reset when I toggle through the different menus in a different page. So just want to make sure you are aware of that. I know someone also mentioned work outside of the system and then bring things back in. That's another way to do it to avoid being logged out. But if you're in here and working, just be aware of that. We don't want you to lose all of your great work. The point system is here with some additional information about kind of their criteria to think about as you're making your designations. So 1 being poor, 5 being excellent. And typically we see a numerical rating of a 4 or above for proposals that ultimately get accepted to the conference. So you, again, think about that in terms of as you're going through your ratings. It's not, you know, an exact science, but that's just a general kind of rule to think about. This is one piece we want you to look at. The other pieces are going to be down here. So you can adjust your screen. For the test, I don't have a lot of text here. You're going to have a lot more text and you can adjust it to make it easier for yourself. But here's where you're actually going to do your ratings. And as you can see for this PVDS session, I have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different criteria that I'm looking at. Findings is one of them, overall clarity, study design, etc. And so I can go over here and make my ratings. And here is the box that Rosie mentioned about comments to the association, which is feedback for the program committee. So this is where you want to put information that you want the program committee to see. This won't be seen by the author. The comments to the author are here below. So we ask for a minimum of 1 sentence, at least for the program committee. Again, it's going to vary depending on the proposal and what you want to convey and communicate to the program committee. And then for the author, there's a minimum of 50 words of constructive feedback, kind of in line with what we've talked about today. So we definitely want to use all of these areas to help convey our feedback to the author. So the ratings, we want that to be aligned with our comments to the author, and then the ultimate decision of accept or reject. In the conversation about, you know, care and equity, if you want to do your proposals and you want to just complete them and then come back and look at them as a collective unit to also make sure kind of you've been equitable across the board. One way to do that is to save your work and finish it later. So you can save what you have and then you can come back to it, accept and continue. and come back to it. And so you can see now the status is saved. So I haven't completed this review, but I've saved what I've done, and I can come back at the end and complete it. You do want to make sure you do come back and actually submit it, because we won't be able to do our piece if that's not done. So the same thing for the others. So if you want to change the subsection to go back to your other evaluate your other presentation to evaluate, you've got that one. Again, toggle through those tabs to make sure you have everything. And then ultimately, if you do save, you need to come back and you'll be able to see this number should be 0 if you have completed all your reviews. It should all be complete here. So if there's anything pending, check out those tabs, email us if you have any questions. Our information is visible here. I want to be cognizant of time. I did a quick overview, but I want to make sure that we have time for any clarity, questions, or any last minute pieces that our panelists want to mention before we let y'all go.
Well, what I would just add is it's okay to save. I appreciate you reminding folks, like, you can come back to your reviews. So thank you, Alicia. And I want to give another thanks and extend gratitude to Drs. Garcia, Pretty, and Quay for being with us today. I really appreciate your insights as our colleagues are working on their reviews to make our ASHE 2024 a great conference. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.